Greetings, moviegoers. I'm the host, and joining me here are my fellow reviewers, as well as this year's South by Southwest volunteers, Lala and Ems. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to look over all the films that we got to see at this year's South by Southwest, and we had a great time. Yeah.
Absolutely. I thought the selections of the movies were great. The curators did a great job of picking the films to go into the festival this year, and I was happy with almost everything that I saw.
All right. What about you, Ems?
Well, it was my first year, and I thought it was a great experience, and pretty much every movie I saw besides one was really awesome.
How many movies would you say you guys saw?
I think my schedule allowed me to see about 12.
All right. How about you?
14, I think, yeah.
28 for me. We began our first day of South by Southwest with the opening night film Chef, written, directed, and starring Jon Favreau as a man whose undying passion for cooking thrusts him out of the restaurant kitchen and onto the open road, where he not only continues to practice his love for making great food, but manages to bond with his estranged son. It was funny, it was sweet, it was just a very cute movie.
I've never really seen Jon Favreau in a movie like this. Granted, I haven't seen everything that he's done, but this movie I could tell was very personal to him even before the Q&A, when he actually said, hey, this is real close to my heart. You can absolutely tell throughout the whole movie that this is like his baby.
The next film I managed to snag a seat for, while the rest had to wait out in the cold because some douchebag forgot how to count and overestimated the number of seats by about 100 people.
The line cut off like one person ahead of us. No seats left. So that was a defeat.
The film in question was the directorial debut of actor Jason Bateman, Bad Words. Bateman also stars in the lead role, a man with a mysterious agenda to compete in the National Spelling Bee. It's dark, raunchy, and occasionally mean-spirited, but I have to admit, I laughed quite a bit throughout this film. For day 2, Lala and I got to participate in a Q&A panel with the director of 500 Days of Summer and The Amazing Spider-Man, Mark Webb, where he got to do a little show and tell for the creative process that went into the main villain theme from this summer's The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
It's very, very interesting to see, going from start to finish, how you create an amazing theme. Not just for what we witnessed, but I mean for anything. I had never seen anything like that before. The kind of work that goes into creating somebody's personality, essentially.
Then we got back to movie watching with the most anticipated film of the fest. For these two, Veronica Mars.
Woo! Yeah, epic! Woo! Yes.
I'll let you guys take over.
For those who maybe don't know Veronica Mars, this show aired, I think it was 2004.
Yes.
The show is just amazing. If you have not ever seen Veronica Mars, check it out. But right now, I'm going to talk about the film itself.
Yeah.
Yes.
My God.
It starts off about 9 years after the show wraps. The show had 3 seasons, so this is after we saw Veronica go to college and all that stuff. They bring a lot of characters back for the movie. There's a lot of cameos made from the show, and that was so satisfying to see. If you're a super fan of Veronica Mars like me, you would really love this movie.
I thought it was alright. Afterward, we went and saw the work-in-progress print of this summer's upcoming raunchy comedy, Neighbors. Seth Rogen and Rose Byrne star as a middle-aged couple with a newborn baby who wind up forging an all-out war against a fraternity that moved next door, led by Zac Efron. I had pretty low expectations going in, but as soon as the movie started, I was laughing my ass off all the way through.
I will say that the biggest surprise in this movie is Zac Efron.
Yes.
Like, I did not expect him to be able to hang with the big boys, if I must say so. Like, you've got some comedy giants.
Bring out the big dogs, too.
Yeah. When it's released, head to your nearest theater ASAP. It is so funny.
Ems and Lala decided not to attend the final screening of the night, which was Predestination, the first of 3 time travel films to play during the fest, and one I couldn't help but enjoy. It stars Ethan Hawke as a member of a secret organization who's been assigned to travel throughout time to stop a madman from furthering any more destruction. Now, I can't really say what I thought about what many have claimed to be the best of the 3 time travel films, The Infinite Man, but from the 2 that I did see, this one's the clear winner. For day 3, we got up pretty early to see director Richard Linklater's most ambitious film to date, Boyhood, which chronicles the life of a young boy and his family through the course of 12 years. Watching people like Ethan Hawke and Patricia Arquette age and experience everyday life under the running time of 3 hours easily made this one of South by's biggest highlights, as well as one of the very best films I've seen this year. Then I was back to my lonesome self and caught a screening of Joe, starring Nicolas Cage as an ex-con who befriends a 15-year-old boy played by Mud's Ty Sheridan, who carries some hefty baggage of his own, mostly involving his abusive and alcoholic father. It's been a while since I saw Nicolas Cage star in a movie that didn't feature his skull bursting into flames or anything Tumblr-worthy, but instead he gives one of the very best performances of his career. This one played twice, so you saw this one couple days later.
I kind of went in with low expectations, not like I thought the movie's going to be bad, just that I wasn't particularly going to like it, but it was the exact opposite. In fact, this is the only movie I saw in the festival that literally brought me to tears.
Next movie you guys got to see with me was Supermensch, which marked as the directorial debut for Mike Myers.
Yeah, baby!
It was the documentary on Shep Gordon, who managed famous icons like Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin,
Blondie,
Alice Cooper.
Alice Cooper is the main one.
If I'm telling you the truth, I had no idea who Shep Gordon was before this documentary. Managers, they kind of fall by the wayside, because the celebrity, the star, the musician is in the limelight constantly. But this guy was like a brother, like a father, like an uncle, just family to all of these people.
And thus we concluded the night with what would have been my most anticipated film of the fest, The Raid 2. But sadly, there was a technical difficulty involving missing English subtitles, and thus the screening ended up being postponed until the next day. My reaction to this can be summed up in this clip.
Son of a bitch!
But the night wasn't a complete loss, as we got to see the film's stars come up on stage and perform some martial arts, and I managed to get my Blu-ray copy of the first Raid movie signed by both the stars and the director, so that was pretty cool. So to kill some time until the second screening for The Raid 2 on the 4th day, we caught a Q&A with Nicolas Cage,
Pastor Troy,
explored the Game of Thrones Expo where we took turns sitting on the Iron Throne like a bunch of bosses, and even saw the new film by Wes Anderson, The Grand Budapest Hotel, which I found to be one of the year's most visually arresting and charmingly entertaining films.
It really was super awesome. I haven't seen all of Wes Anderson's movies.
Same here.
But this movie I would definitely watch again.
And finally, we got to see the long-awaited Raid sequel, complete with English subtitles, and it's the coolest action movie I'll probably see all year. I'll try not to say too much about the plot, as it's one of those things where it truly is essential that you watch the original film, as this one picks up 2 hours later, and our main hero has to go undercover in order to infiltrate the mob, as well as ensure the safety of his family. But if it's action you crave, this movie delivers big time, because I mean, damn.
You just don't see fighting like this anywhere else. So the movie is definitely great for what it is. It's not even mainstream. And this film has a huge following. Mainly dudes.
If the same people end up making a third installment that's just as epic as this, it would be the greatest action trilogy of all time. More so than The Lord of the Rings and The Dark Knight combined.
No way.
I said it. Come on. Day 5, I only got to see 2 movies, one of which only Lala showed up to, and that was Premature, the second time travel movie of the fest, and one that couldn't have been more different than the last.
This movie is basically about a kid that is reliving the day that he loses his virginity And
Over and over again.
over and over and over again until I guess he gets it right.
It's basically Groundhog Day, but with more tissue boxes. The second film I saw was a very special screening of the original 1954 monster classic, Godzilla, which they showed in its original 35mm print just in time for its 70th anniversary. And coming from someone who's never seen the original Godzilla, I was mightily impressed, but not nearly as impressed by what happened next, as the director of this summer's revamped version of Godzilla, Gareth Edwards, came up on stage and introduced an exclusive clip from the new movie. And I gotta say, the hostess on stage said it the best.
Holy
Afterward, they gave us all free Godzilla pins, t-shirts, posters, and I even managed to be a part of the marketing campaign video. Lala had to work again early on the sixth day, while Ems and I went and saw two separate films, The Great Invisible and Stage Fright. Invisible was the documentary that won the South by Southwest Grand Jury Prize about the men who worked for BP when the big oil spill happened. I didn't get to see a whole lot of docs during the fest, but The Great Invisible was definitely one of the good ones. As for Stage Fright, well, let Ems explain it to you.
It's like a horror musical, like it would be like Glee mixing up with Scream. The premise of the movie, like it could have been good. Like it started off like really good, like with Minnie Driver and stuff like that. It was like, oh, horror, yeah, and then the music was really good. It flashed like 12 years later, 10 years later, after this incident happened at this camp, and then it just died all of a sudden and just stayed like that forever. I'm like, man, this is really stupid.
Ems had to work for the remainder of the day while Lala and I went to go see Ping Pong Summer, a comedic love letter to the mid-1980s that I couldn't help but find a bit underwhelming.
I enjoyed the film. It's a movie that I would watch again just because I enjoyed the poking fun at a decade that was pure cheese.
Lala ended up opting out of the next film, so I was left by myself again to see Jimi All Is By My Side, the movie about the beginning of Jimi Hendrix's career from 1966 to 67. The film was directed by the Oscar-winning screenwriter of 12 Years a Slave, John Ridley, who somehow managed to avoid all of the familiar tropes we're accustomed to seeing in most musical biopics and shed new light on a rock and roll icon we thought we knew well. But that in no way shouldn't take away from the extraordinary performance by Outkast's Andre Benjamin as Jimi Hendrix, whom I think should be up for some serious awards consideration. Now I know what you're thinking. The host must be slumming this year when compared to last year's South by lineup. Well, fear not, as on day 7, I broke a new record by seeing a grand total of 6 movies in one day. The first of the 6 films I saw was Breakpoint, about 2 brothers competing for a tennis competition, which Ems and I found to be quite enjoyable to watch. The second film all 3 of us saw was Beyond Clueless, a poorly misguided examination of the high school movies of the 1990s and early 2000s.
Let me just say that until this point, I had not seen a movie that I was disappointed in.
Alright.
But I tried. I literally moved my schedule around just so I could see this movie.
Same
And
here.
showed up
And
to
for-
volunteering late for
Yeah.
this movie.
For it to just fall short of my expectations was a deep blow to my soul.
The next 3 I saw by myself, which were Frank, starring Michael Fassbender as a mentally disturbed musician who hides his face under a dome-sized fake head.
Coca-Cola, lipstick ring, go dance all night, dance all night. Kiss me, just kiss me, Nefertiti.
It was one of the most bizarre things I've seen throughout the fest, but I'd be damned if I said I didn't fall in love with it. Next up, Animals, about a homeless couple in Chicago who steal from others in order to make a living, but nearly destroy themselves with endless amounts of heroin abuse. It was one of the most difficult films I had to sit through, and yet it managed to be one of the most surprisingly well-made love stories to play at South by Southwest. Thankfully, the 4th movie was a comedy, and even more thankful, it was a really funny one called What We Do in the Shadows, from the creators of Eagle vs. Shark and Flight of the Conchords. It's a fake documentary about the daily, or shall we say nightly, lives of vampires living in a flat in New Zealand. If movies like This Is Spinal Tap and The Fearless Vampire Killers had a baby, then this would be it. And for the final movie of the night, we got to see The Guest, from the makers of last year's awesome home invasion thriller, You're Next. The story is about an ex-soldier named David who arrives at the doorstep of the mother of the man he knew during the war and winds up becoming a special guest and helpful hand for her family. But since this was a midnight show, David is not at all what he seems to be, and without giving too much away, it gets pretty violent and disturbing real quick. And boy, was it awesome.
Yes.
On the 8th day, I got to see 4 movies, 2 of which Ems accompanied me for. The first one being Last Hijack, a documentary on Somali piracy that both of us found very dull and boring. The second film we ended up disagreeing on, which was Starry Eyes, a horror movie about a woman who desperately wants to become rich and famous, even at the expense of her very soul. I found it to be a wickedly entertaining movie, while Ems could not wrap her head around its dark, twisted, and flat-out weird nature. The next 2 I saw by myself, which were The Case Against 8, a brilliant documentary about the 4-year-long struggle to overturn California's ban against same-sex marriage, and Space Station 76, an occasionally funny and surprisingly depressing sci-fi romp set in the future as if it were imagined in the 1970s. And now we've come to the final day of South by Southwest, where I got to see 3 movies, while Lala and Ems got to see only 1, which was an exclusive showing of the Doug Benson Movie Interruption, where the aforementioned comedian and a few special guests make fun of, on the spot, the 1986 cult classic Big Trouble in Little China, Mystery Science Theater style. Next movie I saw was Before I Disappear, the South by Southwest Audience Award winner for Best Narrative Feature about a man on the verge of killing himself until he gets a phone call from his sister who desperately needs his help to look after her daughter for a few hours. This was adapted from the Oscar-winning short film Curfew, and even though I never saw it, I still grew attached to the story and characters in feature-length form. And finally, I concluded this year's South by Southwest with Kumiko, the Treasure Hunter, starring Pacific Rim's Rinko Kikuchi, giving a career best performance as a young Japanese woman who discovers a worn-out VHS copy of a very popular American movie. After fast-forwarding and rewinding it countless times, she's convinced that the fictionalized movie holds the key to untold buried riches, and thus goes on a quest to the United States to find it. It was a powerful movie with an engaging storyline and an intriguing heroine, as well as a great film to end the fest with. So that was South by Southwest 2014. Now it's time that we introduce what we thought were our favorites and least favorites of the fest. Starting with you, Lala, what was your favorite film of the fest?
If we're doing favorites, like regardless of if it's a great or a bad movie or in between, my favorite is gonna be Veronica Mars because it was so amazing to be a part of that world premiere of something that I grew really attached to. So hands down, Veronica Mars, favorite movie of the festival.
What about you, Ems?
I would have to agree, because that's the main movie I was looking forward to watching at the festival. I'm like, Veronica Mars, because I'm a super fan. And man, Jason Dohring is so freaking hot on stage.
As for me, my favorites were a toss-up between movies like Boyhood, The Grand Budapest Hotel, and The Raid 2. But if I really had to choose one film, it should be no surprise to anyone that I'd pick The Raid 2.
I knew it.
It's my Veronica Mars, basically. Now let's share our least favorites. Lala?
Oh god, it is no surprise to you guys the way I talked about Beyond Clueless. That was by far the worst movie I saw at South by Southwest.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be Beyond Clueless. Like, yes, stage
Really?
fright, it was bad, but you know it was like campy and stuff, and it was like, you know, there's a story. Beyond Clueless, there was like nothing, it was just a clips, and that's just my least favorite.
Originally, my least favorite was going to be Last Hijack, but after hearing your guys' choices and thinking long and hard about these 2 documentaries, Last Hijack was closer to having a point than Beyond Clueless, so in that retrospect, that ended up being my least favorite of the fest. And that concludes our show. I'm the host,
I'm Lala.
I'm Ems.
and thanks for watching.